So welcome, Rong, CEO of Reactive Network. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to talk a bit about Reactive. We're going to talk about you. Let's start with yourself and your trajectory to this point. I think our Reactive and previously Parsec heads, big community guys will know that you came from Binance and that you worked in the Singaporean police force, but maybe you could just give like a quick summary of that journey in 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me, Francis. So I initially I spent 8 years of my professional career in the Singapore police force. So I was a civil servant, I was a senior police officer. I did national level policies and of course policing stuff as well. I left and I joined Binance. And when I first joined Binance, I was actually in the team that ran the 100 million BSC Accelerator Fund. So that gave me quite a lot of insights into blockchain, crypto, technologies, what are some of the building blocks, etc. And of course, I was with them for 2020, 2021, and then I left and I joined our current company, which I've been here all the way until now.
So yeah, you saw a lot of projects across your desk at Binance, I'm assuming. I think you said something like over 500 applications to that program?
Yes, so in my time over there, we went through more than 500 applications. We invested in 31 of them. So that's basically just a 6% success rate. But it was eye-opening. It was very interesting because we saw everything from the best to anyone would try their luck, right? So they submit the worst kind of application. And of course, we ignore those. But it still takes time to run through. Those were 2020, 2021. There's no such thing as an AI that can help you sift through the rubbish. You kind of have to just take a look. And even if it just means spending 5 seconds of your time, double check and then crossing it out, it still takes some time to sort of run through.
So out of those 31 projects, obviously Parsec was one of those. Any other sort of household names in blockchain that you funded through that program?
Yeah, there was, of course, PancakeSwap. That's probably the big one, which went through the program. There was a few others, Bakery Swap, Venus Protocol, I think went through it as well. Because let's not forget, in 2020, when Binance Smart Chain, as it was called back then, when it first started, it was basically empty. And we had to seed it with not just dApps. And those examples I give were dApps, but we had to seed it with building blocks that can help other people come in. There were bridges. There were data solutions like our former name, Parsec, that's what we were called, but we were basically a data solution. And there were other players like indexes, wallets, and so on. If you come from an ecosystem point of view, starting from zero, you need to bring in projects that not just, enable users to use it. You need to bring in projects that enable other builders to build on the chain so that they can get new users in.
Right, yeah. So you're at Binance, you fund Parsec. Obviously at that point in 2020, Binance is going through maybe the biggest growth it's ever gone through. And you took a risk in joining, by comparison, quite a modest startup. What was the draw there? Like, how did that process go and what made you want to join Parsec?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I invested as part of the team in 31 different startups, right? So there's 31 different connections that I have. What sort of made Parsec stood out? Right at the beginning, Parsec was already in our radar. Early on, I think that was maybe November or December 2020. And by March 2021, Parsec was the best performing asset that we invested in our entire portfolio. So straight away, we've been very, very close with the team back then. It's also the team that I think they are in one of those small minority that's very forthcoming, have always been in constant contact with us. So kind of already knew the founders back then and sort of knew their working style. And I thought that, hey, this is a team that's building real tech, not showy, but very solid in terms of fundamentals, in terms of technology, in terms of data. And that's something that I myself are always very interested in. Because in my role before I entered Binance, I was in the police force, right? But I spent probably about half my police career in intelligence, which, if you look at it, intelligence is transformation of raw data into process information into actionable intelligence. And that whole process is always something that I'm very interested in. So my inclination has sort of like drew me towards us. And that's sort of like the rest then became history.
So you obviously joined Parsec at that point when it was doing smart triggers, right? And then obviously Tsunami API came out shortly after that. So Parsec was kind of one of the, I would say definitely from the developer standpoint, like one of the most highly reputable data indexers that was in the space. Talk me through the decision to pivot from that and build Reactive Network.
This is a very good question. So I think coming in and then, of course, being given trust to sort of bring the whole company forward to the next level is, of course, a great honor. But I think one of the things that we were grappling with already at that point in time, there were a lot of angles that there were a lot of different possible paths. You could just stick to what you've been doing from day one and just hope to carve out a new space for yourself. But I think right off the bat, we knew that the older product, I think, and initially the very first one, was sort of like a token as a service, providing data, but it's basically if this then that service. Back then, 2020, 2021, the majority of use cases we were seeing were not sophisticated. The market just needed sort of a community notification service. And we didn't want to do notification. Our technologies could have been so much more powerful, but the market was just looking for notification. They were not yet looking for something where we were. So in fact, before Reactive Network, we already had one sort of like, wasn't exactly a pivot, but it was an expansion. We expanded because we saw that we need to expand, and also we had the need for it into historical data, and that's why we have Tsunami API. But at the end of the day, that space is also not a blue ocean, it's a red ocean. There's a lot of competitors, there's a lot of big players, there's a lot of different competing narratives and competing demands for such service. It pushed down a lot of, I would say, growth space in that. And very rapidly, as a company, we had to, again, make the decision. What are we really, really good at? And what is it that the market actually needs? And then try to marry them. And very often, what the market actually needs might not be what the market thinks yet. It's a bit like when Apple created the first iPhone. Before that sort of revealing of the iPhone, no one said that they needed a smartphone because it never existed. All they knew is that they needed a phone, they needed a calculator, they needed a radio, they needed a camera, they needed an MP3 player, they needed a computer to play videos and play games and so on. No one said that to put that all together. But iPhone came forward and it's like, hey, I can put them all together. They were probably not the first to kind of come out with this concept, iPhone, iPad, and so on, but they were first to really make it work and sort of explode that creativity, sort of boost it. And that's basically kind of where we were. Like, what is it that we can do that can kind of create a new blue ocean? Not just for ourselves, but really by creating this blue ocean, make it better, make it easier for creativity to run wild, for people to build better on blockchain, for people to explore new technologies, new applications. And from that, we created Reactive Network.
What was like the hardest part of that migration? Because obviously Parsec being very much a sort of a SaaS, kind of a black box to some degree, and Reactive Network being a blockchain with validators, security, everything else that comes with that. So yeah, talk us through that transition and maybe some of the aspects, technical, strategic, which you found both challenging and interesting.
Yeah. So I guess there were a few aspects to it. I think from the technical front, it took us a while to kind of say, is this even possible? The theoreticals were there, and this is also where subsequently when we asked Vitalik, like, why didn't you create this function on Ethereum in the first place? That's where he revealed down the road. But that was already when we already had Reactive Network. But his answer was it was too difficult. From a 2015, 2016 standpoint, there were a lot of sacrifices if they needed to put in that kind of function, and they said, no, let someone else solve it at the next level. And if you look at it from how history turned out, they're probably right. Like, if they had tried to force it through back in 2015, 2016, Ethereum wouldn't be the Ethereum we see today. And it makes sense for someone else to come and solve it at the next layer rather than try to solve it at the fundamental layer. But I think the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges, not the only one, is actually, is it technically feasible? But to us, the fundamentals were there. The technologies that previously we created for if this and that, and of course for Tsunami API and so on, all the various pieces are there. How do we put them together in such a way that enables smart contracts to see events on-chain? So that's like a fundamental leap in terms of smart contracts, that what we're trying to do. But once we solve that, then I think the biggest challenge is, in some sense, I would say that after that, the next step is actually on the token itself. So what do I mean? There's migrations involved. There's all sorts of thoughts about, because back then when we were still parsing, there's a PRQ token. How does PRQ token fit into this whole new ecosystem? And very rapidly we discovered that, oh, the old token, we can't use it. And that created more trouble. And it's like, okay, we needed a new coin because it's a gas coin. And then the old ERC20 PRQ is an ERC20 PRQ, is a token. And you can't really use that. And it wasn't adapted to Reactive Network as a new network for gas and so on. It wasn't built for that anyway. And PRQ as an old token, it makes sense back in 2018 or so when it first was conceived and created. But in terms of what we're doing, it served its purpose and we had to come up with something new. PRQ had a good 6 years odd, I think, 6 to 7 years even. But when we push out our current token, our current coin, React, that transition, there were a lot of difficulties that a lot of people outside of the industry will not be able to understand. This talk about coordinating with exchanges, talks about tokenomics. There's a lot of consideration about how the technology actually links up. Like, you have this coin, how does it fuel this entire ecosystem, burning structures, how it fund and sort of pay for the energy costs in terms of all the computing and so on. I would say that's also where I'm grateful for my time in Binance. So it gave me a very good idea about how, when you start something up from scratch, especially on blockchain level, what are the fundamental blocks that you need? Of course, in Binance case, they use BNB, and BNB even in 2020 is already a highly established top 10 crypto asset in this space. So they had an entire, I would say, structure, army, and wealth sort of to back it up. We had to start from zero. And that's also where a lot of those lessons I learned in Binance and various other lessons I learned throughout my professional career, sort of put them all together to make all of this happen.
Good answer. Okay, so Reactive Network was conceived, built, and launched. So let's take it to, well, not necessarily the present, because maybe we'll talk a little bit about the last year or so post-launch. But I think something that I've observed is that one of the challenges with Reactive Network is it's quite difficult to describe to people in a sentence, right? I've had people asking me, like, if we want more liquidity on our chain, for example, and having to explain to them, no, our blockchain isn't necessary. We need liquidity. That's an execution. Like, ask people, are you like Axelar? Are you like Wormhole? Are you like Layer Zero? Are you like Gelato? And all of these things we're not, right? We use some of those things as our infrastructure, and we have partnerships with some of those. So it would be interesting to hear like how you answer that question. You know, when you meet people at conferences and you have to give the elevator pitch,
Yeah.
what's the few sentences that you use to describe Reactive?
It's something that I've been using, I think, for more than a year now, especially when you meet someone that's not technical, which is the majority of people anyway, even within the space. You talk to someone and you talk about the layers, you talk about consensus, it flies over their head because they are highly technical concepts. And even I myself, I have a STEM degree. It helps, but not everyone's from a STEM degree, and not everyone's from computer science, and not everyone's very familiar with how blockchain works and so on. I always tell them to just think of how blockchains themselves are islands, and people try to build bridges to connect the islands, and we are actually autonomous vehicles traveling on it. Because we enable that travel between blockchains, and by that travel, I don't actually mean just assets. What I meant is actually the root of what we've been doing for all this while is basically data and information. How it travels autonomously on those bridges that we are not builders of it anyway. Someone else probably built those bridges. We connect them together, but fundamentally we allow the autonomous traveling. It sort of opens up, oh, okay, I get what you mean now. And that's also where it gives them this idea that, oh, you're kind of the first in this space that's doing this, isn't it? I said, yes, precisely. Because even if you look at the physical space right now, how many you can count the number of fingers on one hand, how many companies in the world are actually really trying to do this? There's way more, of course. Tesla has been talking about robots for a decade, and they're still testing it. Waymo's still technically in a test, but they've launched in parts of the US, and only in a few cities. So if you've never encountered something like that, you wouldn't have seen it. You have heard of it. And so when I describe it that way as well, quite instinctively, people look at it and say, oh, okay, you are a new concept. I say, yes, this is where we are, but in a blockchain context.
Very good. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So let's touch on the last year of Reactive Network from TGE, mainnet launch up until today. How do you think that's gone, first of all? And what are the successes and challenges of the last 9-10 months?
Wow, I think the last 9-10 months has been, it felt long and short at the same time. Long because so many things have happened. Short because actually if you look back, it's like, oh wow, like where are we now? I think from a project perspective, from an ecosystem perspective, I think those adoption rates, it's been a lot more encouraging than when I first started. Because I know I didn't have the backing of a big entity like Binance. When you start something, you don't have that kind of backing. You're starting from a very grassroots level. We have to start from zero, so to speak. We obviously we are not a new company in this space, so we kind of already have a good reputation. That helps. We already have a thriving community. That helps. We had basically brand recognition, but we are changing brands. It's basically moving from passing this old product to a new product called Reactive Network. That probably involves a bit of translation in between and a transition to kind of a new brand recognition. And all of that basically have its own challenges. But the good thing is we're not starting from absolute zero, but we're starting from the grassroots. We have to push this whole thing up. So we created a lot of setups that basically were trying to boost adoption. We had developer fund, we had a lot of things from the token perspective, because let's not forget about it, because this entire thing as crypto native product sort of built for developers that's building on blockchain, fueled by a crypto asset that's basically the gas coin of the entire network. You have to do a lot of things that's very different from what we have done previously. We have to do a lot of things from that crypto native perspective, pushing the recognition for the crypto token, the crypto coin, React as well. And we were pushing out decentralized liquidity and so on. I think right at the beginning, we faced a big setback when some exchanges didn't want to transit from the old token to the new token with us. And two of them were the biggest exchanges that were our old token PRQ was on. And when they didn't want to move with the transition, a couple of months later, they delisted the old token as well. So obviously that created a lot of volatility in what we are trying to build, what we're trying to push for in our token. I think that sort of created a little bit of panic in some of them in the community. But for us, we were just stuck at it. We just kept building. We created different ways to enable, I think, especially crypto natives who are active in our space anyway, to be able to still get access to our token. We launched a decentralized pool, and we launched incentives around providing liquidity on this space in a decentralized way. And that sort of like stabilized the whole situation. And we moved very rapidly. I think within 2 months, if I recall correctly, our token price actually recovered. And then it was basically moving very quickly from there. In fact, our token performance, which for a lot of people, they look at it and use it as a proxy about how well the project is doing. I don't agree with people doing it this way, because actually how well a project is doing, there are a lot of different aspects to it. But it is a front-facing aspect in terms of how outsiders look inwards and say that, are you guys doing well? And I would say that over the period last year, we actually outperformed the market. We did well. It shows that we have a strong technology. Adoption was going up, number of projects building us went up, number of developers building on us, testing things out, both on the test net and also on the main net, went up quite a bit. And when you look at the graph is exponential. At the beginning, of course, it's slow, and the growth every month went up faster and faster and faster. It means we're doing something good. It means we address a lot of needs of the market. I think where we are now, obviously, we're at the mercy of what the entire crypto market is experiencing. And that's something that we can't fight against the current directly. But where we are is to really drive the next level of adoption. And we have plans for that, which I can probably share later. But the whole point, I think, is that both from the crypto asset point of view, from the technology point of view, and from the adoption point of view, I think the past 10 months has been roller coaster ride, but we did a lot of things right to sort of bring us to where we are today.
So we're going to wrap up with a few final questions, but yeah, that was a really great overview. Thank you. So the last thing I'm going to ask you about Reactive is, in the next 12 months, what is the use case or vertical that you'd be most excited to see utilizing Reactive technology?
Not exactly a vertical, but one of the things that I'm most excited about, I spoke to it to the community before. I spoke to it to the team that have been pushing, kind of personally, is I want to see AI basically using us. What do I mean? I want AI to recommend Reactive Network and our Reactive contracts as a pathway when people are trying to build on blockchain. So right now, when you are trying to do something, you ask the AI for recommendations. You'd be like, I want to monitor things on blockchain. I want to deploy something on blockchains. I want to see, and most of these use cases might be related to trading. That's okay. It depends on what you need. But if you ask AI that, the AI would be like, great, how about you do it this way? I can recommend you an architectural pathway. I can recommend you, this is how you do it. And even if you're not a coder, that's fine, because the AI will teach you step by step anyway. But if the AI is going to teach you, how am I going to get AI to recommend Reactive? And I think that is an extremely strong push, because even if it's just a 5 to 10% chance of AI actually recommending Reactive, we're going to go up from 100 basically RVMs. Each RVM is a reactive virtual machine, is basically one use case. Each of it might have 1 to any number of reactive contracts under it, right? But it supports one use case. So one RVM equals to one use case that they're trying to monitor, react on-chain. We can go up from 100 to thousands in a short period of time. And that to me is the real drive. It doesn't matter if the person deploying it actually have never heard about reactive before. Because at the end of the day, that's where reactive become very useful for the entire, I think, beyond blockchain, because we are going beyond blockchain native. We're going to just solving a problem and solving it very natively for people. And I think that to me is the most exciting thing that I've ever done.
Yeah, it is definitely very exciting, I guess. There's two parts to that. One is obviously reactive being recommended as part of, LLMO, right? Like language model optimization, like the SEO equivalent. And there's also the ability for AI co-pilot coding of reactive smart contracts, right? So I guess those are two similar but also quite distinct things, because one is obviously just informational and the other is, the ability for AI to actually execute the development and deployment of a reactive smart contract. So how far away do you think we are from that?
I don't think we're very far. In fact, all the pieces are there. The things that we've been doing, whether it's on social media, whether it's on our documentations, they're already there. I think there's a few things we need to tweak, make sure that we adjust, make sure that we push forward now in a very targeted manner for AI to start picking up rapidly, not just in terms of recommending us, but in terms of actually, like you said, deploying reactive contracts. And that, I think, the pieces are there, is really getting that rate up to a level that we're satisfied with. Like they could recommend us 10% of the time, 25% of the time, and so on. And do we know the percentage? We don't really know. But we will kind of see the effects of it in terms of the number of RVMs that's deployed on us.
Okay, so speaking of AI, I asked AI to help me out with some of Ronkai's top quotes over the years. And I don't know how it came up with these, but this is my favorite, okay? Leadership is not something to be handled trivially. It's a responsibility and an honor, and it's heavy. Can you talk about that?
Wow. Yeah. Yes, it is. It's something that I fundamentally believe in, and I sort of walk every day. It sort of went back to my days in the Singapore Police Force. Something that I shared when I was superintendent of police. I had other officers reporting to me. I told them this, like, leadership is a journey, but leadership is fundamentally a skill that's different from management. To be fair, I think anyone can be a manager and anyone can be a leader, but the skill sets are completely different. Manager is everything about the brain. It's everything about delivering an outcome in the right quantities and in the right quality on time. That's management. So it's all about the brain. It's all about how you sort of systematically process things, products, data, whatever it is, and then deliver an outcome. That's management. But leadership is about humans, fundamentally. And it came from different aspects of human history. One is pretty prehistory. Leadership is prehistory. Management came later, where you probably have those Sumerian farmers, trying to keep track of all the delivery of goods and copper and stuff like that. That's management. That's when bureaucracy comes in. But I think that's also where I think leadership, if you go back to that prehistoric kind of genesis of leadership is fundamentally about humans, about convincing them that you are someone worth working with and working for. And that is, it's not like a given. It is heavy responsibilities, because for them to follow you, you need to be able to tell them and provide for them and actually be there for them. That's why a lot of people talk about leadership by example, leadership by, well, being at the front rather than just being at the back and telling people to do. I'm not saying that all leaders must always be at the front. And there's a lot of situations, military, other kind of situations, very often the highest leaders are kind of at the back. But why are they at the back is because that is where they have a helicopter view. They can see the whole thing. Once they get into the deep, the ditches, like being at the front lines and dirty, all they see is what's immediately in front of them. They can't actually see the bigger picture. So it is sometimes important for leaders to step back and see the whole thing. But I think it's equally important for leaders to always get back to the front and experience it and then go back. Because that kind of front and back builds leadership that probably is a lot more strategic.
So for future leaders, blockchain founders, first-time CEOs, developers who may be watching this, do you have any advice for building in this market at the moment?
Yeah. I would say that getting your hands and feet dirty is very important. Kind of building onto what I was saying, going in front, going to the back, going in front, going to the back. Get your hands and feet dirty, but always step back and ask yourself, where am I going? What's the directions? What are the threats coming? What am I building that really fundamentally solves the problem? Don't build something and move in a certain direction, for example, just because it's convenient. But you must be going in a direction which is solving a need and providing value to someone else so that, your product can be successful. And success comes in different forms. Ultimately, yes, we're out here to make money. We're out here to make sure that the project, the company, the team kind of survives. And to survive, yes, you need to make money and so on. But if that is your one and only goal, then you actually miss out on what actually enables you to make money in the first place, which is actually providing value. But if you focus on where you are going to provide value, the money will come because people are willing to pay for that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, yeah. Anything you want to add to this conversation before we wrap up?
I would say that I think the crypto market is obviously in a transition zone, so to speak, right now. Anyone's following, looking at the crypto charts, so on, you look at it and it's like, oh wow, that this cycle seems completely off. Yes, it is very different from the previous 3 cycles. But I think the real, I would say, value is actually coming. This is where we transit from the previous world where it's a lot of hopes and dreams, but not too much about actually providing value, to a situation where it's a lot more mature, a lot more particular about providing value, which actually brings a lot of opportunities if you know what you're doing. I think in the past, it is a lot of noise because it's all about hopes and dreams, about narratives. So there's too much noise. Everyone is just shouting at the top of the mountain and trying to get attention to say that, hey, come and look at me. Let's go and get things going. But when you go down to in terms of providing value, it's far and few in between. But right now is where if you are providing value and people can see it and people can, want to be your clients or work with you or so on, this is where you can actually have like a chance in really breaking through. There will still be noise, but you break through the noise and then kind of reach the next level.
Good. Perfect. Thank you, Rong. Much appreciate having you with us and for your time. And it's going to be a big year.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much, Francis, for making this possible.